So the Oklahoma State Senate recently passed SB 1433, a piece of legislation more commonly known as the Oklahoma Personhood Bill. And although this has not yet passed through the House of Representatives, if it does so, and if it's not vetoed by Governor Fallin, then this will become the law of the state, and that has profound implications for the issue of abortion. Because the Personhood Bill basically states that any organism which scientifically qualifies for the status of humanity will also be given the status of personhood for all legal and constitutional purposes. So we know with a matter of scientific certainty that prenatal human specimens at any stage of development do in fact constitute whole individual living members of the species Homo sapiens. They are in fact human, and life for these organisms does begin at conception. So blastocysts, zygotes, embryos, and fetuses, these organisms are merely humans at an early stage of development in the process of their life. And I will provide a couple quotations in the information bar to demonstrate this, but it's actually fairly common knowledge. And if you read some of the literature emanating from pro-choice leaders who are educated, what you will find is that they've already conceded this fact. So this is problematic for pro-choice individuals because if we grant the status of personhood to anything that is scientifically human, if all humans are given the rights of personhood, then the prenatal population will be endowed with all of the rights, privileges, and protections that the postnatal population enjoys, and we will have effectively extended the equal protection of rights to this group of our population, which means that there will be increased restrictions on abortion, and the current legal status of the operation and the industry will in fact have become quite precarious. So pro-choice organizations have done everything that they can in order to fight this piece of legislation, to prevent it from passing through the House of Representatives. And therefore, I think that it might be pertinent to examine some of the approaches that they have taken, because you can't simply tell people that they should oppose the personhood bill because it will restrict abortion, at least not in the context of Oklahoma, since most Oklahomans are pro-life. The vast majority of our legislature, of those holding statewide offices, and of the Oklahoma constituency wants to restrict abortion. So if your only argument against the personhood bill is that it restricts abortion, you're basically telling people, well, you should vote against this because it gives you a voice in your government. It lets you have a say about what's going on in your own state. It represents your wishes and the wishes of the people. But you don't want people to know about that if you want to overturn the bill. So you ignore the fact that this is the will of the people and you redirect attention. See, they have to mischaracterize this piece of legislation so that they can claim that it will do things that it won't actually do. So in this video, I'm going to address two of their primary arguments against this piece of legislation to demonstrate the profound falsehood that emanates from each of these. Now, the first argument claims that if the personhood bill passes, then any woman who has a spontaneous natural miscarriage can be held responsible for manslaughter because her body rejected the prenatal human specimen, culminating in that prenatal human specimen's death. But this demonstrates a complete misunderstanding of what the definition of manslaughter is in a legal context, and it also demonstrates a total ignorance of the concept of mens res present in the American legal system. But that's a lot of legal mumbo-jumbo, so I don't want to get too deeply into that for right now, because it's not actually necessary. If you do some minimal research, you will find that this bill does not criminalize women for miscarriages. In fact, it contains language which specifically says that the bill cannot, and I'm reading a quote here, be interpreted as creating a cause of action against a woman for indirectly harming her unborn child by failing to properly care for herself or by failing to follow any particular program for prenatal care. So quite clearly, the bill does not allow for women who have had natural, spontaneous, involuntary miscarriages to be held responsible, even if those miscarriages have in fact culminated as consequences of their own reckless behavior. Now, the second approach employed by pro-choice individuals and organizations in order to attack this piece of legislation has been to capitalize on popular misconception and ignorance when it comes to the mechanisms with which certain types of contraceptives work. So specifically, we're looking at the birth control pill, we're looking at emergency contraceptives such as the morning after pill, and we're looking at intrauterine devices, IUDs. The argument is that these methods of contraception work by preventing implantation, and that they therefore lead to the death of a prenatal human specimen and will be banned by the personhood bill. Now, this is untrue for a number of reasons. First off, because these methods of contraceptive are actually employed prior to conception, they would be used before there is any organism to have its rights removed, and therefore, at the time that they are used, there would be no organism to defend, and there would be no grounds for preventing their employment. But even if that were not the case, it is completely moot because none of these methods of contraception actually work as anti-implantatives. Instead, they work by inhibiting the movement of the male gamete or by preventing ovulation. The misconception that they work as anti-implantatives derives from a theory which actually said that perhaps a side effect of certain contraceptives might be that they make the uterine wall less hospitable to the prenatal human specimen. However, although they have attempted to do so, scientists have been unable to find any experimental evidence with which to buttress this theory. So there is no reason for us to believe that this is the case. On the contrary, recent research actually suggests that this effect isn't even happening, that these forms of contraception aren't having an anti-implantive effect. But you don't have to take my word for any of this. I'm going to provide a series of links in the information bar which will clearly demonstrate that none of these methods of contraception work as anti-implantatives, and that there is no evidence for the theory otherwise. Thank you for watching my video, and please remember that if you choose to oppose this amendment, or rather this bill, you can do so, but don't do so based on the misinformation employed by certain pro-choice organizations.